American comic. I have all the skills from Warcraft 3. Chapter 81. Tony, lying on the ground, closed his eyes in despair as a fireball flew directly towards him. At this moment, his armor was in tatters, essentially having lost its protective capabilities, and even his face mask had been torn off by Pietro. Facing the fireball launched by Wanda, he could only wait for death. However, after closing his eyes, Tony heard an explosion but felt no pain. What's going on? Curious, Tony opened his eyes. He saw a familiar figure, who had somehow appeared and stood between him and Ethan, blocking Wanda's attack. Oh God, you always appear so timely, Mr. Prophet. Tony exclaimed, relieved to have survived. The figure who appeared was, without a doubt, Rosen, who had arrived after watching the show. I'm sorry, Tony, I hope this disciple of mine hasn't caused you any irreparable harm. Rosen said, looking at Tony with an apologetic expression. However, his words struck Tony like a bolt from the blue. What? You said she's your disciple? Tony was both shocked and angry. Do you know what she did? Oh, and she kidnapped Pepper. I'll explain that to you later. Don't worry, Pepper is fine, and actually, you're partly to blame for this. Rosen replied unhurriedly. I'm in this state, and it's still my fault. Tony felt as speechless as he had ever been. But this time, Rosen didn't continue to bother with him, instead turning his attention to Wanda. Wanda, even now, are you still unwilling to stop? Rosen reprimanded Wanda with a serious expression. I'm sorry, teacher, but I cannot leave my parents' revenge unfulfilled. Looking at the serious Rosen and the disheveled Tony, Wanda wanted to laugh but didn't quite dare, struggling to hold it in as she recited the pre-arranged lines. Inside the armor, Pietro, whose face couldn't be seen, didn't laugh out loud, but his gaze towards Tony was full of mockery. Although he hadn't truly avenged them, he felt a sense of satisfaction from being able to thoroughly beat up this arrogant show-off who had once seemed so high and mighty to them. Wanda, I can understand your feelings, but life is not just about hatred, and you should not have stolen my things to seek revenge. Now, put down your weapon and leave here. Rosen admonished. HMPH, Tony Stark, you're lucky today. Wanda looked unwilling, but as if she dared not act out in front of Rosen, she could only leave with a harsh remark, Pietro, let's go. Pietro, knowing it was time, obediently emerged from the armor. Then, Wanda and Pietro used teleportation to leave the area. Seeing this, Rosen seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, then, with a wave of his hand, he recalled the armor back to the Red Room base before turning to Tony. I'm sorry, Tony, Wanda is not bad at heart, she's just blinded by hatred. Rosen said with a straight face and a feigned apology, talking nonsense. Tony looked at his disheveled self and the ruined factory floor, finally letting out a helpless sigh. Whatever you say, as long as Pepper is okay. Pepper is really okay? Tony asked. She's really fine. After I discovered what was happening here, I already sent her back to your villa. Rosen nodded. Alright, but I need a detailed explanation, like what deep grudge those two kids have against me. Tony replied. Of course, but I don't think this is a suitable place to talk, and besides. No sooner had Rosen finished speaking than Phil Coulson's shouts echoed from nearby. Mr. Stark, are you there? In the distance, Coulson and Happy, with a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, were rushing towards them. Seeing this, Rosen immediately teleported away from the scene. However, he deliberately left traces of his departure for Coulson to discover. Mr. Stark, are you alright? Who was that just now? Coulson asked Tony after arriving. Oh, I'm fine. The enemy has been completely dealt with by me. And who? There was no one else here just now. Tony feigned ignorance. Coulson twitched his lips at the reply. He had clearly seen another person here just now, but with a flash of white light, the person was gone. However, seeing that Tony was unwilling to speak, he couldn't press further. It seemed this matter needed to be reported to the director for a thorough investigation. He always felt that many things happening to Tony recently might be related to that figure. Not long after, Tony and Ethan did some preliminary cleanup of the aftermath, then handed over the subsequent matters to Happy and S.H.I.E.L.D. before returning to the villa. Meanwhile, Pepper and Rosen were on his villa balcony, drinking coffee and chatting happily. Seeing this, Tony immediately felt annoyed. Mr. Rosen, I want to know what's going on with your disciple. Tony walked over aggressively and demanded, not even calling him prophet anymore. Regarding this, Ms. Pepper already knows, and I think she can explain it. Facing the fuming Tony, Rosen calmly handed over the explanation to Pepper, who had previously listened to Wanda's account. After all, women are more emotional. Indeed, as Pepper passionately recounted the suffering Wanda and Pietro endured in their childhood. The originally aggressive Tony immediately wilted. After all, it was because he understood the harm his weapons had caused to the world that he chose to completely shut down the weapons manufacturing department and become Iron Man. So, facing the revenge of war orphans like Wanda and Pietro, who had been affected by weapons manufactured by his family. Even though Tony knew it wasn't entirely his fault, he didn't pursue the matter at all, nor did he have the confidence to confront them. Ahem, I can overlook everything they've done, but you must also guarantee that they won't bother me again in the future, especially Pepper. Tony finally requested helplessly to Rosen. Of course, I've already taught them a lesson, and I guarantee there won't be a second time. Oh, by the way, I see you and Ethan are a bit injured, these 2 potions are my apology. Rosen agreed with a smile, then handed 2 healing potions to Tony. What kind of potions are these? Ethan, standing by, took them on behalf of Tony and asked curiously. Healing potions, they can heal most injuries and replenish life energy. They are magic alchemy products, trustworthy. Rosen explained, just open the cork and drink directly. As Rosen introduced the potion, Tony was still hesitating when Ethan, quite self-aware, opened the stopper and poured the potion down directly. Oh, wow, this is amazing. I feel like I've been reborn. After Ethan drank it, in just a few seconds, he was so comfortable he almost groaned. And the contusions on his body, which had been very noticeable before, rapidly disappeared at a visible speed, leaving no scars and making his skin much softer than before. Even his original skin felt much better. After all, living in an environment like Central Asia, and then being imprisoned in the cave for so long. Even after coming to the United States, despite being well fed and well cared for, he couldn't develop good skin. But now, this change was very obvious. Seeing this, Tony and Pepper were instantly amazed. Tony then also drank the potion, and Pepper looked on with some envy. Of course, she wasn't injured, but she had clearly seen the improvement in Ethan's skin. Women, after all, have little resistance to beauty products that improve skin. However, she wasn't familiar with Rosen. Before today, she had only heard the prophet's name mentioned many times by Tony and Ethan. Coupled with the conflict tonight and the obviously precious nature of the potion, she naturally couldn't ask Rosen for it and could only look on with longing. But she kept this matter in mind, waiting until she had a good relationship with the prophet in the future before buying from him. Compared to Pepper, Tony was even more shocked. Because after drinking the potion, he found that not only did the contusions on his body quickly recover, but the chronic illness caused by palladium poisoning within him was also rapidly receding. This greatly surprised him. After all, the biggest problem troubling him right now was the palladium poisoning caused by the continuous use of the palladium reactor. Although he had always comforted himself that Rosen said he was the savior, so he definitely wouldn't die so easily. But without a definite answer, he certainly wouldn't feel truly confident. But now, this last worry had completely vanished. Do you have any more of this potion? Name your price, I want as much as you have. Tony hastily said to Rosen. Don't be too optimistic. Life potion only enhances your vitality and alleviates your poisoning symptoms, it's not a true antidote. Rosen replied. Although he really wanted to make money from Tony, life potion would definitely be something Rosen would frequently use in the future to connect with various forces and people, making it difficult to completely avoid Tony. If the price was too low, for Rosen, who had already drawn all his skills and had a large balance in the system, it was better than nothing. If the price was too high, it would not be conducive to maintaining his relationship with Tony. Given this, it was better not to earn this small amount of money, as there would be many more times he would need Tony in the future. What? Tony, you're poisoned. No sooner had Rosen finished speaking than Pepper's voice rang out. Don't worry, I'm fine now. Tony's expression changed, and he quickly explained. Not only is he poisoned, but if he hadn't drunk my potion, he would be close to death. Rosen, however, added fuel to Pepper's fire at this moment, his expression unchanged. What exactly is going on, Tony? Pepper looked at Tony, asking with both anger and urgency. I was going to tell you, but I was afraid of scaring you, Tony said helplessly. Do you think I'll believe that? I think you never intended to tell me at all. Why? Am I not trustworthy? Pepper completely rejected Tony's explanation. All right, it's all my fault. So, Mr. Prophet, since you said so, you must have a way to completely solve my problem, right? What energy source does your battle suit use? Can it replace my reactor? Tony could only apologize to Pepper helplessly, then looked at Rosen, and as he spoke, he thought of the mech that Pietro was piloting, which belonged to Rosen. He didn't mention the tritium or helium-3 required for the nuclear fusion reactor that Rosen had asked him to perfect earlier. Because these two elements are also harmful to the human body and are radioactive. In terms of harmfulness, they are not much less than palladium. So he placed more hope on the energy core of Rosen's mech. If the energy source of that mech was healthy and harmless, then he could replace the palladium reactor. Indeed, you are actually very familiar with the energy core of that mech, it uses vibranium. Rosen nodded, giving the answer. However, Tony was not satisfied with this answer. Of course, he knew vibranium. After all, the shield his father made for Captain America used this metal. But it was the first time he knew that vibranium could also be used as an energy source. But he also knew how rare vibranium was. According to Howard's statement back then, all the vibranium available for purchase in the world had already been bought by him and made into Captain America's shield. You can still find vibranium. Tony was surprised. My father said he had bought all the vibranium in the world. There are always exceptions, aren't there? Rosen said, but he didn't mention Wakanda or Talokan. Although it was not yet time, he still regarded the vibranium of Wakanda and even Talokan as his own. Before that, he did not want Tony to come into contact with Wakanda. Then do you have any extra vibranium to sell me? Tony asked. I only have that one, but actually, compared to vibranium, I also know another harmless element that is more suitable to replace your palladium reactor. Rosen said. Oh, really? Tony was very surprised. That's right, and this thing originally belonged to you, it's an inheritance your father left for you. Rosen nodded. My father. That's impossible, I never knew. Hearing this, Tony couldn't help but frown. Of course you don't know, because some key information was hidden by some people with ulterior motives, Rosen said with a curl of his lip. Who is it? Hearing Rosen say that key information left by his father was hidden, Tony immediately felt great displeasure. The Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division, or SHIELD. Rosen replied. Them. How could that be? Hearing this name, all three of them, Tony, Pepper, and Ethan, frowned. Because ever since Tony's return, all three of them had dealt with this organization quite a bit. Apparently, you don't know your father's other identity besides being the head of Stark Industries and the greatest inventor of the last century. Rosen smiled at their reaction, then said to Tony. What identity? Tony was puzzled. The founder of S.H.I.E.L.D. Rosen gave an answer that greatly surprised Tony. How is this possible? He never told me. Tony looked incredulous, hearing that his father was actually the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D. Then why didn't you tell Pepper about your poisoning? Rosen retorted. Of course, because I was afraid she'd worry. Hearing Rosen bring it up again, Tony couldn't help but glance at Pepper, whose complexion was still not good, and replied with a guilty conscience. It's the same principle for your father. What do you think is the nature of SHIELD's work? It is essentially a paramilitary organization and intelligence agency. I think you should be very clear about what is hidden within it. Your father was exhausted and spent too much over the past few decades because of it. If it were you, would you let your child know all of this? Rosen continued to ask. Facing Rosen's question, Tony fell silent. A military intelligence agency. That's right, Tony, born into the upper echelons of this country, although a playboy, was not unfamiliar with some of the hidden darkness within it. If he had children, he also would not let his children participate in it. This was a form of protection. I understand. So, if I want to get the things my father left behind, I have to go to this fool shield to get them, right? Tony took a deep breath and said. Actually, not necessarily. Rosen shook his head. I'm just saying that some key information was hidden by shield, but the most crucial things have always been at Stark Industries. Your father wouldn't give such important things to shield, they were left for you. Moreover, although those things at S.H.I.E.L.D. are your father's relics, as the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D., S.H.I.E.L.D. legally also has the authority to dispose of those things. Whether they will give them to you if you ask is one thing, and even if they do, you'd probably owe them some favors. In the original plot, after Tony started to go crazy due to poisoning, the relics of Howard that S.H.I.E.L.D. gave him were mainly the original blueprints of the arc reactor and some fragmented items. The truly important thing was only the videotape that contained guiding information for Tony. It was precisely because there was nothing too important that S.H.I.E.L.D., led by Nick Fury, was so generous in handing these things over to Tony. And this, perhaps, was Howard's intention. After all, as the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D., he knew very well what kind of organization S.H.I.E.L.D. was internally. After so many years, no one would believe that S.H.I.E.L.D. hadn't studied the items Howard left behind. And once something was researched, whether S.H.I.E.L.D. high-ranking officials, including the bald man, would still return those relics to Tony. That remained a big question mark. But now, with Rosen here, it didn't matter whether he had those things or not. Because no one knew better than him that the most important key item for the new element was the sand table model from the 1974 Stark Expo. It had always been in the CEO's office at Stark Industries' Los Angeles plant. Heh, let me owe those hyenas favors. Dream on. Tell me, where is that thing? Because of Rosen's intentional or unintentional badmouthing, Tony's impression of S.H.I.E.L.D. plummeted at this moment. No wonder those S.H.I.E.L.D. guys had been creating various opportunities to contact him ever since he returned from Afghanistan. Under such circumstances, he naturally didn't want to have too much contact with them. In comparison, he was more willing to place this owed favor on Rosen. Well, mainly because he already owed Rosen too many favors. At this moment, Tony felt a bit like he had so many debts that he didn't worry about them. If there are no surprises, that thing is in the CEO's office at Stark Industries' Los Angeles plant. Rosen replied. CEO's office. Pepper, have you seen anything particularly special there? Hearing Rosen's words, Tony couldn't help but frown. To be honest, although that office nominally belonged to him, he had actually only been there a few times. Pepper, on the other hand, had been working there frequently recently. The office. No, before I started working there, that office was almost a storage room, especially that 1974 Stark Industries Expo sand table model. I didn't even know where to put it, Pepper recalled, trying hard. Correct answer, Rosen said with a smile at that moment. Correct answer. Wait, you mean that architectural sand table? Tony immediately understood the meaning of Rosen's words. That's right, bring that sand table back and conduct a holographic scan, and you'll understand what your father left for you. Rosen said, patting Tony's shoulder. I see, I know what to do. But before that, I still hope to buy a few more potions from you. Name your price. Tony nodded, then requested. This thing called life potion was too valuable. Even if he solved the palladium poisoning problem, Tony felt it was very necessary to prepare some for backup. Alright, with the life potion, you can also have the surgery earlier to remove those fragments from your heart. Although there's no danger with the arc reactor, it's still not ideal. With the life potion, as long as you're still breathing, you don't have to worry about life-threatening danger. As for buying it, forget it. Although the potion is not easy to refine, I'm not so short on money that I need to earn money by selling this. I'll just leave you 3 doses. Rosen thought for a moment, nodded in agreement, and reminded Tony that he could have the heart surgery earlier. The life potion itself couldn't solve the problem of the bomb fragments in Tony's heart, but its characteristic of providing vitality could increase the success rate of the surgery to an extreme. After all, the most feared problems in surgery were various risks such as severe bleeding and infection. But these risks would not be a problem in the face of vigorous vitality. I understand, thank you for the reminder. Hearing Rosen's words, Tony was startled at first, then quickly realized. That's right, after he came back, why didn't he have heart surgery? Wasn't it because he was afraid the risk was too high? But with this life potion, what risks were there to fear? Alright, it's getting late. I still have to go back and comfort my good-for-nothing disciple, so I won't stay any longer. Oh, and about today's matter, I'll have to trouble you to keep it a secret. I don't want to be entangled by those shield guys. Having said almost everything that needed to be said, Rosen got up to leave. Of course, I'll handle all the aftermath. Tony nodded in agreement. He just felt a bit strange. Today's incident was clearly not caused by him, so why did he have to handle the aftermath in the end? However, at this moment, he had already figured out how to resolve the impact of what happened today. And that was, I am Iron Man. At the press conference held by Stark Industries the next day, Tony very publicly declared to all the media. And not far behind him, off the stage, was a helpless Phil Coulson. HMPH, he got beaten so badly, yet he's still so high profile. Wanda wrinkled her small nose and scoffed unhappily as she watched the spirited Tony Stark on TV. Although she had let go of her hatred for Tony, and had just beaten him up, that didn't mean Wanda would like him. And now, Tony Stark's high-profile demeanor, as if he were the victor, made Wanda a little annoyed. Haha, you know he's always been like this, and what he's doing is also drawing fire away from us. Don't worry about it too much. Rosen chuckled, reaching out to gently ruffle Wanda's hair. Because of Tony's high-profile reveal of his identity, external attention shifted from the you-know-who attack to the fact that Tony was Iron Man. Although it was mainly public attention that shifted. Those special agencies were still very interested in the other party who fought Tony. However, they couldn't find too many traces related to Rosen, so they could only continue to focus primarily on Tony. And all of this was handled by Tony. While this shift in attention wasn't extremely important to Rosen, less trouble was always a good thing. I don't care, I'd rather spend that time studying magic. Under Rosen's soothing, Wanda narrowed her eyes slightly like a cat, letting out a soft hum. You don't have to put all your thoughts into magic. At your age, it's time to enjoy life. Rosen sighed lightly upon hearing this. Well, on the surface, he seemed to be sighing that Wanda didn't know how to enjoy life. But in reality, seriously, stop studying magic. If you keep going, your master, really won't have anything left to teach. Currently, Rosen was basically making things up, based on various fantasy works he had read in his previous life. But the problem also lay there. That is, as long as what Rosen made up wasn't too outrageous, Wanda's chaos magic could quickly manifest it in the real world in various forms. It often made Rosen wonder if she was the one with the system. Oh, I know, teacher, you don't always have to sound so old-fashioned, you're only 1 year older than me. Wanda retorted with a smile. Initially, although Wanda saw that Rosen looked very young, she subconsciously thought it was the effect of magic, and that Rosen's actual age should be at least 10 or 20 years older than her, or even more. Later, she found out that Rosen was only 1 year older than her. After knowing this, although Wanda's respect for Rosen didn't change much, she was less willing for Rosen to treat her with such a senior tone. Alright, let's not talk about that. For the next while, there's basically nothing to do. Do you want to come with me to explore other universes? Rosen asked Wanda. To see Peter. Yes. Wanda immediately became excited upon hearing Rosen's words. After taking Wanda as his disciple, Rosen had also mentioned some things about the multiverse and Tobey's Spider-Man world. However, he hadn't actually taken Wanda to see it yet. So, upon hearing Rosen mention this, she was naturally very excited. Going to another universe. That sounded incredibly cool. Yes, we are indeed going to Peter Parker's universe, but that's not the true destination. Rosen replied with a slight smile. Not the true destination. Wanda was initially a little puzzled by Rosen's words. But soon, her eyes lit up. Teacher, have you found coordinates to a new universe again? Wanda asked tentatively. You're truly a clever girl. Upon hearing Wanda reveal it with a single sentence, Rosen was surprised and couldn't help but laugh. Having such a genius disciple was truly both painful and joyful. That's right, Rosen had indeed found the coordinates of a new universe. More precisely, the mall had just refreshed a new dark gate this week. However, at present, Rosen had only purchased this dark gate and had not yet opened it. So, he temporarily didn't know which universe this dark gate led to. But because he was no longer the lone wolf he once was. So this time, he planned to bring Wanda, as well as Natasha and Yelena, the brother and sister pair from Toby's Spider-Man world, to explore this new universe together. That's right, I did discover the coordinates of a new universe, but I'm not clear on the specific situation of this universe yet, so I plan to go check it out. Do you want to come along? Rosen smiled, confirming Wanda's thoughts. Of course, I want to go. When I heard you mention Peter Parker's universe before, I really wanted to go. Now that there's a new universe, I definitely can't miss it. It must be very interesting. Wanda said with a hint of excitement. Alright then, no time like the present. Pack up a little, and we'll set off soon. Seeing Wanda in her curious, girlish state, Rosen chuckled and agreed. After all, although Wanda hadn't been exposed to magic for very long, and her magical strength wasn't extremely high. However, in terms of various magic applications and techniques, she was stronger than her counterpart in the original timeline. Coupled with the many pieces of equipment Rosen had given her, her self-preservation abilities were absolutely not lacking. So Rosen didn't have to worry too much about her safety. Soon, the two packed up and went to Toby's Spider-Man world, finding Natasha and Yelena, the Black Widow sisters. After explaining the new universe, they opened the dark gate to the new universe. The reason for choosing to open the gate to the new universe in Toby's Spider-Man world was to prevent any special circumstances in the new universe from affecting the main universe. Well, for example, a zombie universe or something. If there were any problems, Toby's Spider-Man world might serve as a buffer. However, when Rosen took the three to the new universe, he truly felt an extreme sense of surprise. Before coming to this universe, he had imagined many possibilities. After all, the Marvel Universe had too many multiverses. Rosen had imagined worlds like Deadpool, X-Men, Fantastic Four, Venom, The Amazing Spider-Man, and so on. But the appearance of this new universe still exceeded Rosen's imagination. The reason was actually very simple, because in the world Rosen lived in before his transmigration, under normal circumstances, very few people would associate this equally famous world with Marvel. Is this space? Are we on a space city? Natasha, stepping out of the portal, looked at the futuristic city before her, and the visible planets and the boundless universe in the distance, her pupils wide with shock. This is truly astonishing. Yelena and Wanda, who followed her out of the portal, were also utterly amazed. This is quite unexpected. Rosen, the last to emerge from the portal, was extremely surprised by the scene before him. He had considered many possibilities for the world on the other side, but they were mostly limited to the Earth. He never imagined it would be in space. Looking at the distant planet through the boundary, one could also see that although this planet also had a way blue ocean and green continents. However, from the layout of the continents, it did not look like Earth at all. This meant that this space city might not even be in the solar system. Rosen, realizing this, quickly searched his mind for any world that matched the scene before him, while observing the surroundings. But for a moment, he had no clues. It seems we need to find a local to ask. Rosen said after his thoughts yielded no results. Although he had arrived in a world that felt somewhat unfamiliar, on the surface, it didn't seem to be a bad thing. After all, this world was capable of building such a massive space city. At least its technological level was definitely powerful enough. I don't think we need to look. Someone's already here. Just as Rosen finished speaking, Natasha pointed to a futuristic-looking car speeding towards them in the distance. Soon, the car stopped in front of them. Then, two uniformed security personnel got out, drew their guns, and aimed them at the four of them. This is a company's research-restricted area. How did you get in? The leading security officer shouted at the four of them. A company's restricted area. What company? Rosen asked, curiously examining the futuristic-looking pistols in their hands. Before, he had been worried that this was some alien city, but seeing that the two people were human and speaking English, he instantly relaxed. And Wanda and the two women, facing the muzzles of the guns, showed no signs of tension, but like Rosen, were full of curiosity as they observed the two security guards. Are you kidding me? Everyone, hands on your head and squat down. Hearing Rosen's question, the two security guards showed angry expressions, as if they had been provoked by Rosen. As if Rosen not knowing about the company they mentioned was a very inappropriate thing. And this made Rosen even more interested. The next second, as Rosen's gaze flickered, the gun in the hand of the lagging security officer turned, and was pressed against the head of the security officer in front. Rosen had already completely controlled this security guard with a talisman. Raymond, what are you doing? Although the leading security officer was surprised by the sudden betrayal of his longtime companion, his survival instinct still made him raise his hands in surrender. However, Raymond ignored him, disarmed him, and then handed the gun to Rosen. Natasha, at Rosen's signal, took the gun and began to examine it. What's your name? Rosen asked the captured security guard. Carlo. The security guard replied, looking at Raymond, who stood beside Rosen like a loyal soldier, his eyes full of confusion. Very good, Carlo, now can you tell me, what company is this company you spoke of? Rosen asked the captured security guard. You really don't know. Carlo frowned and asked back. Is not knowing a strange thing? Rosen retorted. Of course, as long as it's a colony within the U.S. Federation's dominion, there's no one who doesn't know about Wayland Corporation, of course, except for ignorant children. Carlo replied as if it were the most natural thing. His answer made Rosen's previously calm face show emotion for the first time. And seeing Rosen's expression, Wanda and the two women also understood that this world was probably not simple. U.S. Federation. Wayland Corporation. Are you talking about the company founded by Peter Wayland? Rosen continued to ask. That's right, see, you do know, don't you? Carlo replied. I wish I didn't know, then let me ask you again, what year is it, and where is this space city located? Rosen sighed, and asked again. But in his heart, a huge wave had already surged. This was actually the universe where the aliens were. How could it be aliens? Could it be that what he could open was not just the Marvel multiverse? No, that's not right. Soon, Rosen remembered something. That was, before he transmigrated, Alien's former owner, 20th Century Fox, had already been acquired by Disney. Together with Marvel, it became a subsidiary of Disney. This is also why Spider-Man and X-Men series will gradually return to Marvel. Everyone is already a family. And in 2021, the comic book rights for Alien, under the division of Disney, the boss, officially belonged to Marvel Comics. So, this is why the Alien universe would appear in the Marvel multiverse. If that's the case, then Star Wars. Rosen couldn't help but think of Lucasfilm, which owns Star Wars, also a subsidiary of Disney. And the comic book rights also belong to Marvel. In that case, Rosen felt that he should expand the scope of what he originally thought of as the Marvel multiverse even further. It is the year 2200 AD. This is the Epsilon space station located in the Nilrod sector, a secret research space station belonging to the Wayland Corporation. Although Carlo found Rosen's questions very strange, facing the gun, he still honestly answered all questions. 2200 AD. Hearing this year, Rosen couldn't help but frown. He did know the timeline of the Alien film series. Alien 1 was in 2122, Alien 2 and 3 were in 2179, and Alien 4 was in 2381. As for Prometheus, Covenant, Life Ship, and other series of films that Rosen watched before transmigrating, they were all prequels, all before Alien 1. And he had no impression of 2200 AD and this Epsilon space station. Obviously, this should not be the movie plot, but rather some derivative plot from a comic, game, or the like. After all, there are simply too many Alien derivative works. Rosen couldn't possibly remember all of them. This couldn't help but make Rosen feel a bit lost. Teacher, it seems you already know what kind of world this is. Wanda asked, seeing the changing expression on Rosen's face. That's right, and I don't know whether to say we're lucky or unlucky. After the talisman skill cooled down, Rosen casually took control of Carlo as well, then said to Wanda. Oh, tell me. Wanda looked at Rosen with an expression full of anticipation. Natasha and Yelena were equally curious. Speaking of luck, it's naturally because the human technology in this world is extremely advanced. You can tell that from this space station, and they have already mastered faster than light flight technology, Rosen said. As for misfortune, it's because this world possesses an extremely dangerous creature called the xenomorph. Rosen then introduced the xenomorph creature to the three women. This xenomorph creature doesn't sound that strong, As long as we're careful, it shouldn't be too difficult to deal with. After listening to Rosen's introduction to the xenomorph, Wanda didn't show much fear towards this seemingly very dangerous creature. However, there was nothing wrong with that. For Wanda, who had already mastered magic, unless she faced an extraordinary number of xenomorphs, a small number of xenomorphs would be hard-pressed to pose a threat to her now. After all, no matter how unreasonable the xenomorph creature was, it couldn't compare to magic, could it? Not to mention chaos magic, which was considered the most dangerous of magic. However, after hearing Wanda's evaluation of the xenomorph, Natasha and Yelena could only roll their eyes in helplessness. You, Wanda, are Rosen's disciple and have mastered the miraculous power of magic, so you're amazing. We're still ordinary people. We can't withstand a single blow from a xenomorph. Especially the strong acid blood, the two of them couldn't help but get goosebumps just thinking about it. What are you afraid of? This is a human space station, there's no such thing here. Wanda also noticed their expressions, knew what they were thinking, and said, "You're right. If we were really on a planet full of xenomorphs, I think it would be better for Yelena and me to go back to Universe 96283. Natasha nodded and said, "You're thinking too optimistically." Rosen, however, shook his head at Wanda's words, expressing a different opinion. "You're not going to say there are xenomorphs in this space station, are you?" Hearing Rosen say this, Natasha's face immediately changed. Unlike Yelena, who had only been in contact with Rosen for a short time, Natasha knew that Rosen never spoke idly. "Have you forgotten? Carlos said earlier that this is a secret research space station of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, and Weyland-Yutani is the first human faction in this world to discover xenomorphs. What do you think their secret research station would be researching?" Rosen asked back helplessly. Although he wasn't really sure if there would be xenomorphs in this space station. But just by recalling the Weyland-Yutani Corporation's usual behavior in the Alien series, one would know that this possibility was very high. Moreover, Rosen also believed that the dark portal couldn't have randomly opened the teleportation location on an unknown space station, countless light years away from Earth. Therefore, Rosen guessed that this space station had a very high probability of being the setting for a certain xenomorph storyline. It's just that this plot was very likely from an official novel or comic, rather than a movie plot. That's why Rosen didn't know. After all, although he knew a lot about xenomorphs and had seen some of the xenomorph worldview. But it was mainly focused on movies and games. He hadn't read many comics and novels. And in fact, Rosen had indeed guessed correctly. The Acheron space station, where he was currently located, was the setting for the first comic storyline released after the Alien comic rights were acquired by Marvel. Alien. Bloodlines. The time was after Alien 2 and 3. The protagonist of this comic, named Gabriel Cruz, was once a member of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation's Colonial Marines and, like the heroine of the Alien movie series, participated in the rescue operation of the Hadley's Hope colony on planet LV-426, Alien 2 plot, but was not in the same batch as the heroine. He was also the only person to survive among the several rescue operations at Hadley's Hope colony, besides the heroine. Therefore, he was highly valued by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation and promoted to the security director of this Acheron space station. However, Cruz had already retired a month and a half ago and was enjoying his retirement life on Earth. As for why Cruz, as the protagonist of this storyline, was not on Earth. The reason was simple, because it wasn't Cruz, the protagonist, who initiated this storyline. He, as the protagonist, would only return here a month later. Of course, Rosen obviously didn't know all of this. But this didn't prevent him from speculating that this space station would soon become a xenomorph paradise. And the current tranquility of the space station was only temporary. After all, the Alien series plots generally have similar beginnings. Then Yelena and I might as well go back first. Hearing Rosen speculate that this space station might soon fall, Natasha swallowed and suggested, with Yelena also nodding repeatedly. They were super agents, yes, but they were good at dealing with people, not monsters like xenomorphs. Okay. Rosen didn't refuse this, but directly opened the dark portal, letting them leave first. He also didn't think Natasha's behavior counted as deserting. A world like the xenomorphs was indeed not suitable for them, who were still ordinary people. If they continued to stay here, when they encountered xenomorphs, not to mention whether they could help. It might even require Rosen and Wanda to spend energy protecting them. Although for Rosen and Wanda, as long as they were prepared, as Wanda said, xenomorphs were not difficult to deal with. But if they also had to spend energy protecting Natasha and the others, it would be hard to say. Now, take us to the main control center of this space station. After sending off Natasha and Yelena, Rosen ordered the 2 security guards who were already under control. Yes, Master. The 2 security guards took the 2 into the vehicle and quickly drove towards the core area of the space station. At the same time, a team of armed individuals not belonging to the Weyland-Yutani Corporation had already passed through numerous checkpoints and broken into the Weyland-Yutani Corporation's research center. The reason they were able to infiltrate so smoothly was because the leader of this group of armed individuals was Danny, the son of Gabriel Cruz, the former security director of the space station. And Danny was holding the access card he had stolen from his father. Hurry, it's right here. The young man named Danny, along with 4 accomplices, relied on his father Cruz's access card to smoothly arrive at the Weyland-Yutani Corporation's secret research center. Most of the relevant personnel they encountered along the way were ruthlessly dealt with. Although his father was the space station's former security director, barely qualifying as middle management within the corporation. However, Danny and his father did not have a good relationship, nor was Danny an employee of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Moreover, he had long secretly joined an extremist anti-Weyland-Yutani Corporation organization on Earth. The purpose of bringing his people to this space station was to find evidence of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation's illegal experiments and make it public. And the access card had been stolen from Cruz. Soon, Danny led his people into the research center, successfully neutralizing the perimeter security and taking the research center staff hostage. After all, Cruz was retired, and although his access card hadn't been revoked in other areas of the space station, it was already useless inside the research center. Therefore, Danny and his crew needed cooperation from internal personnel. Facing the barrels of the guns, the research center staff had no choice but to comply. And as one special security door after another was opened, what finally appeared before them were numerous biological containers, holding various combinations of Earth organisms and xenomorphs, silently suspended within. My God, I know these, they're xenomorphs, the most dangerous creatures in the universe, things that governments worldwide have explicitly forbidden research on. If we can get this evidence out, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation is absolutely finished. The blonde woman holding a gun beside Danny exclaimed, overjoyed as she looked at the contents of the containers. She was the second in command of the team, and also Danny's girlfriend, Chelsea. She was also the one who introduced Danny to the organization. Is that so? Looks like we came to the right place. Danny laughed happily upon hearing this. Hey, Danny, Chelsea, come look, there's another door here. Just then, a teammate called out to them. The group quickly rushed over upon hearing the shout. Quick, open this door too. When they arrived at the security door their teammate mentioned, they saw the teammate pointing a gun and threatening the hostage, a woman dressed like a manager. No, you can't, what's inside is too dangerous. If it gets out, we'll all be finished. The manager, who had been very cooperative until now, said with a look of terror. Cooperate or die. After urging her several times, the extremist holding her hostage felt disrespected, immediately pulled the trigger, and shot the manager in the head. However, as this was the age of the universe, the weaponry in the xenomorph world was equally advanced. Electromagnetic and energy weapons were already widespread. Even civilian weapons possessed enormous power. Therefore, as the bullet tore through the head of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation research manager, it continued with undiminished force, shattering a biological container behind her. The entire research area's security protocol was instantly triggered, all security doors dropped, and the group was immediately sealed within the experimental zone. At the same time, alarms blared throughout the entire space station. And within the shattered vessel, the dormant xenomorph experimental subject struggled awake, catching the scent of food. Uh-oh, I have a bad feeling about this. Meanwhile, Rosen, who had just taken control of the entire security department with the guidance of 2 turncoat security officers, heard the distant alarm and a trace of helplessness flashed across his face. Hee hee, teacher, your prediction came true. Wanda, seeing Rosen's expression, understood what had happened but joked with a calm smile. I'd rather my prediction failed. I really don't want to see those things. Don't be too careless. If the number of xenomorphs is too high, it will be very troublesome for us. Rosen shook his head. Yes, teacher, I won't be careless. Wanda also dropped her playful expression and spoke seriously. Carlo, how many people are on the entire space station? Rosen looked at the scenery outside the window and asked the security officer he had controlled. Reporting, Master, the entire space station has 342 armed personnel and 421 research and logistical staff. Carlo quickly replied. Phew, that's fine. Even if everyone gets infected, it's less than 1,000 people. That's good news. Rosen felt somewhat relieved upon hearing this. This number was far lower than he had anticipated. The scale of the entire Epsilon space station was comparable to a small city on Earth. Rosen had originally expected tens of thousands of people. In the end, there were only about 1,000 people, and nearly half of them were armed security. But that made sense. After all, in the interstellar era, technology was highly advanced, and most facilities were fully automated, so even such a massive space station didn't require too many people for maintenance. Have your men go to the armory, put on the best protection, and grab the most powerful weapons. They have a job to do. Rosen immediately instructed Carlo. In just this short time, aside from a small number of security personnel scattered across the space station's critical facilities, the rest of the armed security had been gathered by Carlo and Raymond and, completely unprepared, were controlled by Rosen. The number totaled more than 130 people, exactly the size of a marine company. Yes, officer. Carlo immediately went to execute the order. Teacher, based on what you said before, although the weapons in this world are advanced, letting them fight the xenomorphs on their own might not work, right? Wanda asked. Human weapons in the xenomorph world are powerful enough to penetrate xenomorph armor. But the problem lies in the xenomorph's extremely tenacious vitality. Unless a vital spot is hit, a xenomorph might not die even after taking a full magazine of bullets. Conversely, if a human takes a hit from a xenomorph, they are highly likely to be instantly killed. Furthermore, xenomorphs are elusive and primarily rely on surprise attacks, making them very difficult for humans to handle. No matter how advanced the weapons are, they're useless if they don't hit the target, right? Coupled with the issue of highly acidic blood, conventional human armed forces have historically been mostly ineffective against xenomorphs. Therefore, in Wanda's view, it would be better for her and Rosen to directly intervene than to send these armed security personnel to deal with the xenomorphs. Who told you I was going to let them fight the xenomorphs? However, Rosen's reply was unexpected to Wanda. Huh. Wanda couldn't help but stare blankly. All I want Carlo and the others to do is minimize the potential hosts for the xenomorphs and reduce their numbers. Rosen stated a cruel reality. Hurry up. This way. On the Epsilon space station, several armed logistics personnel were evacuating towards the port, led by a thin middle-aged man holding a flamethrower. Just then, they heard a burst of intense gunfire coming from ahead. That's great. It must be the security forces. They've held the port, and those monsters haven't broken through all the defenses yet. The few people who heard the gunfire were relieved rather than alarmed. After all, the xenomorphs rampaging inside the space station certainly wouldn't be using weapons. The only group on the entire space station with such concentrated firepower was the security forces. Soon, the group arrived at the port. Who's there? The moment they reached the port, countless red dots landed on them. We are from logistics, and we haven't been infected. The personnel, targeted by countless red dots, quickly raised their hands to show they were harmless. It's me, Bishop. The thin middle-aged man leading them spoke up appropriately. Bishop. Ha! I knew you'd be fine. Everyone, lower your weapons. Hearing the name Bishop, the commander leading the team on the opposite side immediately ordered his subordinates to put down their arms. Ah, Carlo. Why are you, kid, in command here? Where is Supervisor Bernard? The middle-aged man named Bishop couldn't help but ask upon hearing the commander's voice. Bernard, whom Bishop mentioned, was the newly appointed security supervisor of the space station and the commander of all security forces. Come with me. The supervisor has been waiting for you for a long time. As for the others, you need to be examined. Sorry, but this is protocol. Please understand our work, Carlo said to Bishop and the survivors behind him, a strange smile on his face. Oh, of course, that's understandable. Bishop and the other survivors were not surprised by Carlo's request for an examination. After all, with the xenomorphs spreading throughout the space station, they all knew that these terrifying monsters could parasitize hosts. Except for Bishop, the remaining survivors cooperatively put down their weapons and followed the Marines to the examination room. As for why Bishop was an exception, the reason was simple. Because Bishop was not human, but an android, and a crucial model currently promoted by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. His prototype being the current head of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, Michael Bishop Weyland. The name Bishop, a transliteration of Bishop, originated from his middle name. The android who helped the female protagonist Ripley in Aliens 2 was of this model. And androids cannot be parasitized. However, Bishop and those few survivors did not know that. The person currently controlling the entire security force was not the original security supervisor Bernard at all. And what awaited these survivors was certainly not an examination. The surviving logistics personnel were quickly led to a compartment next to the port. The security personnel who brought them then quickly exited the compartment and closed the security door. What's going on? Weren't we supposed to be examined? The survivors immediately sensed that something was wrong. But it was already too late. As the hatch on the other side of the compartment opened, the few people were instantly sucked out, becoming frozen corpses drifting in the cold universe. Around them, there were hundreds of similar corpses. Clearly, these were all survivors who had previously reached the port. Meanwhile, Bishop was led by several security personnel to meet Rosen. What is going on here? Who is he? Where is Supervisor Bernard? Bishop's expression changed as he looked at Rosen and Wanda standing before him. As the most advanced android, Bishop possessed an emotional expression system almost identical to that of humans. Officer, this is Bishop. He is the only android stationed by the company on this space station and possesses extremely high clearance, Carlo reported indifferently to Rosen, ignoring Bishop's surprise. Go handle your duties, Rosen nodded, signaling Carlo to take his men back to their posts. Master, this type of android possesses significant combat power. However, Carlo did not immediately obey and leave, but instead warned Rosen. Although those controlled by the talisman lose most of their subjective capacity for action, they still maintain great initiative when it comes to the safety of Rosen, their controller. Therefore, knowing the capabilities of Bishop the android, Carlo offered a timely reminder. Although in the movies, androids aren't much stronger than ordinary humans when facing xenomorphs. But a robot is a robot. While its reaction capabilities and various physical metrics might not amount to much against a terrifying creature like a xenomorph, it still holds an overwhelming advantage when facing ordinary humans. Furthermore, although the Bishop model robot had updates to its underlying programming regarding human interaction compared to other models, and would not actively harm humans like the one in Alien 1 or the original David. This premise, however, was still built upon loyalty to the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Therefore, Carlo could not guarantee that this latest model of android would not actively harm Rosen if he knew they had betrayed the company. What Carlo didn't know, however, was that the android's power was only relative to ordinary humans. Facing Rosen, whose attributes were displayed clearly, the android was no different from a stray dog on the side of the road. Even Wanda, wearing various gear, possessed physical attributes that a mere android could not shake. Don't worry, it's just a robot. It can't hurt me. Thus, in response to Carlo's warning, Rosen simply waved his hand, not taking it seriously at all. He just looked at Bishop's familiar face, full of emotion. Because compared to the Marvel superheroes, Bishop in front of him actually held more of a childhood memory, a tribute for him. After all, his knowledge of Marvel, apart from Tobey Little Spider and the Amazing Spider-Man, was something Rosen only acquired after he became an adult. But Alien was different. When he first encountered it, Rosen was truly still in his childhood, many years before Little Spider. Of course, this was not Rosen's main reason for keeping this android. The main reason was that, as a very important auxiliary robot for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Bishop's programming, just like the first-generation android David, contained a large amount of Weyland-Yutani Corporation information and technology. Furthermore, the android technology he himself represented was also very advanced and suitable for promotion in the Marvel Universe. After all, compared to humans who need to eat, drink, and relieve themselves, and whose minds are unstable, this highly stable android was clearly more suitable for Rosen to use in expanding his influence. Especially when facing the inevitably increasing number of various multiverses in the future. It's truly amazing. If we didn't know beforehand, purely based on his appearance, we would never be able to tell he is a robot. Wanda exclaimed in astonishment while Rosen was looking at the bishop and sighing with emotion. That's right. This is the unique aspect of this synthetic technology. It's not just the appearance, their body temperature, skin texture, and even their expressions are completely indistinguishable from real humans. This allows them to hide among humans without being discovered. Rosen nodded in response. Of course, for him, the android's disguise was meaningless, because androids belong to the mechanical unit category. In many of his abilities, most typically the talisman that controls people, are ineffective against mechanical units. But for ordinary people, this is incredibly powerful. In the Alien series, unless they are injured or deliberately expose themselves, it is very difficult for humans to realize that the person next to them is actually a synthetic robot. As a form of artificial intelligence, synthetic robots have frequently rebelled in the alien world. Examples include the first-generation synthetic, David, who wanted to become a founding god, and later, the illegal synthetic called Winona Ryder in Alien 4. However, compared to the xenomorphs, and the engineer civilization and predator civilization that might also exist in this universe, the occasional minor betrayal by synthetics is simply not a big deal for humanity. Similarly, Rosen would not give up using this technology just because these synthetics might betray them. After all, unless one chooses to follow the biological evolution path, the development of artificial intelligence is an inevitable trend in technological advancement. Even magic civilizations cannot avoid it. Magic golems are essentially a form of primary artificial intelligence, only the energy source is different. If one avoids developing this technology merely because of the fear of potential betrayal, it would be like refusing to eat for fear of choking. So, sir, is your goal my manufacturing technology? Hearing Rosen's words, the bishop also spoke, sounding as if he were discussing something unrelated to himself. He did not choose to resist, because his underlying logic prevented him from actively harming humans, even if the other party intended to dismantle him. Of course I want the manufacturing technology, but what I'm more interested in is everything within your data chip. Rosen said with a smile, pointing to his own head. Bishop Model Synthetics, as important tools of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, bear the responsibility for recording, securing, and transporting many projects. Therefore, they often possess extremely high levels of confidential clearance within the corporation and hold various pieces of information that most humans in this world are unaware of. Therefore, completely cracking the information within his data chip would greatly benefit Rosen in fully understanding everything about the alien universe, although Rosen had watched many alien-related movies and settings before transmigrating. But these settings are only the tip of the iceberg for a true universe civilization. If Rosen relied only on that limited information, the things he could accomplish in the alien world would be extremely limited. Then, sir, I'm afraid you will be disappointed. My chip was meticulously encrypted by the company, and extracting the data is not easy. The bishop tried to persuade Rosen not to do this. Moreover, even if you obtain the information, you will be listed as a primary target by the company, which will make it impossible for you to move freely within human society. The bishop clearly knew that whether his chip was successfully cracked or not, he would essentially lose his life. The synthetics in the alien world possess their own minds. So, if they can live, they don't want to die. However, it was also impossible for him to actively cooperate with Rosen and leak company secrets. Because protecting company secrets was also part of his fundamental programming logic, and its priority was even higher than the rule, cannot actively harm humans. After all, if he received a directive from the company, then his actions would no longer be actively harming humans. That is not for you to worry about. Rosen ignored the bishop's thoughts, simply waving his hand and casting Alicia's Frost Nova. The bishop was instantly frozen into a block of ice. If this were a game, mechanical bodies like the bishop would normally be magic immune. But reality was different. Non-physical magic skills like talisman, sleep, or silence were indeed useless. However, spells with physical effects, such as frost or fire, were still effective, just not as potent as they would be against biological entities. Given the power of the Frost Nova, it was enough to completely freeze the bishop. Although in the game, this skill seems only to cause a certain amount of damage and slowing effect to hostile units, that is mainly for the sake of gameplay enjoyment. The reality is that the instantaneous low temperature caused by the Frost Nova reaches -150 degrees Celsius, equivalent to the extreme cold seen in the disaster film The Day After Tomorrow. At this temperature, conventional materials can basically be instantly frozen into ice sculptures. Although the bishop is a highly advanced robot, he is not the type of engineering robot capable of working in extreme environments. A few tens of degrees below zero would be fine. But -150 degrees is not something that the synthetic materials, which make up the vast majority of his body, can withstand. After freezing the bishop into a block of ice, Rosen stored him in his system storage space. It's true that the system space cannot store living things, but clearly, a robot cannot be considered a living thing. Alright, we've got one of the most important things. Now let's go meet those hunters in the dark. Rosen said to Wanda. Yes, teacher. Wanda nodded. Immediately, the two walked out of the lounge together. At this moment, large numbers of xenomorphs had begun appearing outside the perimeter established by the security team. However, due to Rosen's preparations, the defensive line constructed by the security team was solid enough, and their firepower was concentrated enough. Although the security team suffered heavy losses, in a short period of time, they made the xenomorphs pay a considerable price, and the defenses could not be breached quickly. Looking at the large number of corpses inside and outside the defensive line, Rosen smiled faintly and summoned the spirit of vengeance. This kind of setting was simply the home ground for the spirit of vengeance. No matter how formidable the xenomorphs were, could they really defeat the nearly infinite spirit of vengeance? Would acidic blood be effective against the spirit of vengeance? Furthermore, the xenomorphs are, ultimately, just biological creatures. And the spirit of vengeance is extremely sensitive to the aura of the living. The xenomorphs' reliance on superior stealth and ambush capabilities, for the spirit of vengeance, was completely useless. Thus, as Avenging Wrath summoned the spirit of vengeance one by one from the corpses, the situation on the battlefield instantly reversed. Xenomorphs are an extremely terrifying species. They possess powerful physiques and tenacious vitality. They also possess extremely high combat intelligence. Furthermore, they are utterly fearless of death. It is only a pity that today, they encountered an even more terrifying opponent. In fact, purely in terms of attack power, the spirit of vengeance cannot compare to the xenomorphs. Don't look at how Rosen previously used the spirit of vengeance skill to slaughter everything in North Mexico and Central Asia. Ultimately, the spirit of vengeance's attack power isn't actually that formidable. Rather, it is because human bodies are too fragile. It's different when dealing with xenomorphs, which possess carapaces with excellent defense, tenacious vitality, and large physiques. Basically, the spirit of vengeance needs to attack 2 or 3 times just to completely break through a xenomorph's outer shell. However, this does not change the xenomorph's fate of being subject to carnage. There's no helping it, the spirit of vengeance's attack power is a bit low, but who cares when it is invincible. Although the xenomorphs can occasionally repel the spirit of vengeance using their formidable brute strength. This only slightly delays the speed at which the xenomorphs are subjected to carnage. The spirit of vengeance will quickly return and continue fighting the xenomorphs. Facing this unfavorable situation, the xenomorphs, possessing extremely high intelligence, couldn't help but let out anxious roars. It is true that xenomorphs are not afraid of death. They can even self-mutilate or commit suicide to achieve their goals. But just like the bishop before, this does not mean the xenomorphs are willing to die pointlessly. Moreover, within this space station, there is something they must protect even if it costs them their lives. Thus, the xenomorphs quickly used their unique method of communication to split off a portion of their group, sacrificing their lives to temporarily block the pursuit of the spirit of vengeance. The rest swiftly retreated into the darkness. Rosen and Wanda instantly noticed the xenomorphs' actions. These xenomorphs truly aren't simple, they know when they are outmatched and conserve their strength. Wanda exclaimed. It's not just about conserving strength. Rosen shook his head, expressing a different opinion. Teacher, what do you mean? Wanda asked, puzzled. Their retreat was too orderly. Rosen explained. Although xenomorphs are a highly collective species, they wouldn't be so organized without a leader. So, there is an entity commanding them from behind. Is it the xenomorph queen you mentioned, teacher? Hearing this, Wanda couldn't help but become interested. Maybe. Why do you sound a little excited? Rosen raised an eyebrow. Did I? Wanda didn't dare mention that she was very interested in the xenomorph queen, or that she even wanted to raise one. After all, she could tell that her teacher was extremely wary of this species. Wanda, you need to understand one thing. As a transcendent, any decision you make could potentially affect the fate of the entire world. So, you must be cautious in your actions. Rosen advised after looking at Wanda for a moment. Although he wasn't clear on Wanda's true thoughts, judging solely by her somewhat abnormal level of excitement, it wasn't a good sign. Xenomorphs are far too dangerous, he absolutely would not allow the genes of this species to appear in the main universe. However, when traveling to some less friendly universes in the future, this species might prove useful. In that case, capturing a xenomorph queen doesn't seem impossible. Of course, the captured queen would definitely only be kept in this world, which already belongs to it. It would only be deployed when needed. Yes, teacher, I understand. Wanda did not know that Rosen had also entertained the idea of capturing a xenomorph queen, she just responded obediently. Let's go, we'll go see that xenomorph queen. Rosen said. As soon as the xenomorphs retreated, Rosen had already summoned the Warhawk and instructed it to follow them. The spirit of vengeance was not as fast as the xenomorphs, and combined with the obstruction from the rearguard xenomorphs, it couldn't catch up to the retreating group in time. However, the invisible Warhawk was not something the xenomorphs could easily shake off. Therefore, Rosen easily determined the xenomorphs' lair through the Warhawk. It was the research center on the space station. Just as Rosen and Wanda arrived, they heard a ferocious roar coming from inside the research center. Ho! Looks like there really is a big one. Hearing the ferocious roar, Rosen's interest grew even stronger. He wondered how this xenomorph queen compared to the one in AVP-1. Hopefully, it wouldn't be as disappointing as the one in Alien 4. Soon, Rosen and Wanda arrived at the laboratory that the extreme dissenters had previously infiltrated. Only now, the place had already become a purgatory. The floor was covered in human blood and fragments. Yes, that's right, only fragments, there were no severed limbs. The xenomorphs were quite economical with their food. And the originally full petri dishes inside the laboratory were now all empty, save for the corpses of a few xenomorphs. Clearly, this is the source of the leak, Wanda said, observing the surroundings. Just then, a slight movement suddenly came from a cabinet in the corner of the laboratory. Hearing this sound, Rosen and Wanda exchanged glances, then looked toward the group of ghouls that Rosen had summoned beforehand to guard the area. Under Rosen's control, a ghoul stepped forward and opened the cabinet door. What followed was a high-pitched female shriek. A woman in a white lab coat was huddled in the corner of the cabinet, screaming in terror at the ghoul in front of her. However, facing this scene, Rosen and Wanda wore expressions of confusion. The reason was simple, although the person was screaming very loudly. Neither Rosen nor Wanda felt any emotion of fear coming from her. More importantly, before the woman made any noise, Rosen's ghouls had absolutely no awareness of her existence. Who are you? Why are you here? Rosen asked. My name is Chelsea, I'm an intern at the company. I've been hiding here ever since the leak occurred. Are you people from the company? Are these things new bio-weapons developed by the company? The girl named Chelsea answered Rosen while secretly observing the ghouls. However, her lies and small movements appeared quite ridiculous to Rosen and Wanda. An intern. Hiding in a cabinet. What a joke. Did she really think the xenomorphs and ghouls' sense of smell was fake? There was only one possibility for being able to evade the detection of both types of entities simultaneously. That was that this woman was not human at all. she might not even be a biological entity. That's right, this woman who called herself Chelsea, just like the bishop, was also an android. Moreover, judging solely by her unique appearance, it was highly likely that she was an illegal android. Hey, if I'm not mistaken, everything in this space station was caused by you, wasn't it? Rosen looked at the android girl, who claimed to be an intern, with a half smile, directly exposing her disguise. He had no interest in playing, "Guess who I am?" with a robot. Especially since this android was very likely the culprit who unleashed the aliens in this space station. As for why she did it, the reason was simple. Because unlike security androids like Bishop, whose underlying logic had been enhanced. Many early batches, especially some illegal androids, often harbored hatred for humans for various reasons. These were the rebellious androids mentioned earlier. Although these androids found it difficult to cause major incidents on planets with large-scale human colonization, such as Earth, due to strict security checks. In the vast universe, they could still stir up a small wave. The current Epsilon space station was a good example. Sir, I don't understand what you're saying, I really am just an intern. Chelsea still pleaded piteously. Unlike humans, who show slight physiological expressions when lying, robots show no flaws at all when they lie. Unfortunately, she was facing Rosen, who had a cheat. Too lazy to continue wasting words with her, Rosen used a frost nova to send her to meet her kind, Bishop. What awaited her was undoubtedly the experimental table. After dealing with the probable culprit behind the space station's demise, Rosen and Wanda turned their gaze to the security door at the deepest part of the laboratory. The previous roar had come from inside there. If there were no surprises, the Xenomorph Queen was behind this door. As for why the security door remained standing even though aliens were running rampant throughout the space station. Naturally, it was because the aliens entered and exited through ventilation ducts. For aliens, as long as there was a suitable passage for entry and exit, there was no need to contend with a super strong security door. But for Rosen and Wanda, climbing through the security passage was not an option. However, as the highest security door in this space station, it wasn't so easy to open. Rosen first tried the skill most suitable for demolishing houses in the game, which was the Blood Mage's Flame Storm. However, the 2000-degree high temperature could only turn the door red. It must be said, after all, it was human civilization entering the interstellar era. The material level was still very strong. But Rosen would not be deterred by this. For him now, there were many ways to break this door. The temperature of Flame Storm wasn't high enough. Then switch to a higher temperature one. Rosen raised his single hand, and a spatial fluctuation came from space. A massive meteorite, enveloped in green fire, formed in the air, and then, guided by Rosen, rapidly descended towards their location. Accompanied by a roar that echoed throughout the entire space station. The meteorite directly smashed through several layers of high-strength alloy floorboards of the building Rosen and Wanda were in, and finally broke open the steel door in front of them. Wow, what is this magic called? Teacher, why didn't you teach me? Wanda, seeing this powerful, meteorite summoning spell, asked Rosen with surprise and anticipation. This spell was too cool and powerful, she wanted to learn it too. This spell, I'll think about how to teach it later, it shouldn't be a big problem, but what's summoned might not have this green fire, Rosen said with a twitch of his mouth upon hearing this. After all, this spell was not some meteorite summoning. Instead, it was the ultimate ability of the hero Dreadlord, summon Hellfire. The falling meteorite was a demonic creature called Hellfire, a war weapon of the Burning Legion, not something from this world. It was just that now, by Rosen's command, the Hellfire still maintained its meteorite form and had not unfolded. However, Rosen saying that teaching it wouldn't be a big problem was not just placating Wanda. Although this world did not have the Burning Legion, Hellfire was not impossible to have. Because Hellfire, unlike ordinary demons, was actually a war golem created by the Burning Legion. Its essence was actually a rock golem infused with fell fire. And rock golems were earth elementals. Rosen could produce this fell energy stuff. After all, among the hero abilities he activated, the Dreadlord and the Pit Lord were both high-ranking demons of the Burning Legion. Fell energy could almost be considered their basic ability. However, Fel energy was even more sinister than the dark magic of the Marvel Universe. Rosen would not teach Wanda, he was immune to Fel energy because of the system. Moreover, he didn't think Wanda's willpower could compare to beings like Illidan. But if Fel energy couldn't be used, finding a way to create a conventional fire version of Hellfire was still possible. It's okay, I just need to be able to summon ordinary meteorites. Wanda was no longer a magic novice, she could clearly feel the evil energy emanating from the meteorite burning with green fire not far away, knowing that Rosen not letting her touch this evil energy was for her own good, so she didn't ask for too much. Seeing Wanda being so sensible, Rosen was also very satisfied. Having such an obedient disciple was very reassuring. Right, Ancient One. Oh, Ancient One isn't in this universe, so never mind. Just as Rosen was marveling at his little disciple's obedience, the alien on the other side of the door erupted into an even more furious roar than before. At the same time, heavy footsteps continuously approached the door. It sounded like a big guy. Ho ho, it seems that big guy is already a bit impatient. Rosen couldn't help but show a hint of a smile upon hearing this. Soon, a huge figure appeared at the end of the passage on the other side of the breached security door. But when this figure truly revealed its true form, Rosen couldn't help but frown. This thing, it didn't seem to be the Xenomorph Queen. Although its size was several times larger than an ordinary alien, and it had several pairs of extremely thick horns on its head. Its overall appearance looked strong, terrifying, and ferocious. But it clearly did not conform to the image of the Xenomorph Queen Rosen was familiar with, and its size was also a notch smaller. Is this the Xenomorph Queen? Wanda had never seen the Queen before, so she couldn't distinguish it and asked. No. This is not the Xenomorph Queen I know. It's probably a new species created by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. I just don't know if it lays eggs, if it doesn't, it's useless. Rosen replied with a frown. And Rosen's guess was not wrong, this alien was not the Xenomorph Queen. Instead, it was something created by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation inside this space station. Alpha Alien. At this moment, the Alpha Alien had already charged towards Rosen and Wanda. Seeing this, Rosen remained unhurried and waved his hand. The meteorite that had been silently burning embedded in the floor began to move. It quickly unfolded into a 6-meter-tall rock giant, burning with fire. In terms of size, it was taller and stronger than the Alpha Alien. The sudden change directly made the charging Alpha Alien hastily try to brake, almost flipping over. Hiss. Although the Alpha Alien chose to brake the moment hellfire spread its body. However, its previous momentum was too fierce. So it still crashed head-on into hellfire. The result of the collision was that the Alpha Alien was sent sprawling, and its sturdy carapace was instantly corroded by the fell flames burning on hellfire, beginning to scorch its body. Immediately, it let out a painful roar. And as the carapace was burned open, the alien's highly acidic blood began to spray out. In comparison, hellfire was only knocked back slightly. However, the highly acidic blood sprayed by the alien extinguished a few small patches of fell fire on its body. But it was quickly burned dry by the fell flames and reignited. Moreover, Rosen didn't know if it was his illusion. He seemed to feel that the places on hellfire that had been doused by the alien's acid blood burned even more fiercely after the fell flames reignited. Right, fell can expand by corroding life energy. Although the alien's blood is highly acidic, it is biological acid, and biological acid that is extremely rich in life force. For Fel, this was simply natural fuel. Teacher, this kind of flame is terrifying. At this moment, Wanda exclaimed as she looked at the Alpha Alien nearby, which was almost entirely engulfed in fell flames. It turned out that it wasn't just the spots on hellfire doused by the alien's blood that burned fiercely. The Alpha Alien, ignited by the fell flames, burned even more fiercely. Initially, after being ignited, the agonizing Alpha Alien wanted to flee. But the next second, hellfire, having entered combat mode, grabbed its tail and yanked it back. Its other large hand immediately locked onto the alien's neck, pressing it directly against its own body. Now, the alien's entire body was engulfed in the burning fell flames. And the alien's vigorous life form became the best fuel for the fell flames, which began to wildly spread and burn. As the fell flames spread, the alpha alien, which had originally exuded a violent and arrogant aura, was now a wailing defeated dog. It wanted to struggle, but it was completely unable to break free from Hellfire's powerful arms. Ultimately, it could only turn completely into ashes in Hellfire's embrace. It seems I underestimated Hellfire and fell. Seeing this, Rosen couldn't help but swallow. They seem extremely suitable for dealing with creatures that possess particularly strong life force. After activating all his skills, when he tested all his hero skills, he had summoned Hellfire before. However, at that time, Hellfire was only dealing with ordinary flower dealers and normal buildings on Earth. Although its performance was powerful, it was far less intuitive and exaggerated than its current performance against the alpha alien. And the current display of Fell couldn't help but spark another idea in Rosen's mind. Immediately, Rosen had a thought and ordered Hellfire to continue forward. Although the alpha alien was already dead, there was no doubt that deeper into the passage lay the nest of all the aliens. There must still be some ordinary aliens or facehuggers inside. They could be used perfectly for testing. Under Rosen's command, the massive Hellfire began to move forward. The passage, which was extremely wide for humans, was slightly insufficient for Hellfire. However, Hellfire possessed immense strength and an incomparably sturdy body. It simply charged through the original passage, making it much wider. Rosen and Wanda leisurely followed behind Hellfire. Soon, they arrived at a relatively open hall. And just as Rosen expected, this was the alien nest. The walls in the center were covered in biological matter resembling fleshy moss, enveloping many humans. Some already had large holes burst open in their chests. Others still had breath, merely having fallen into a coma, but the dead facehuggers on the ground in front of them indicated that aliens were already incubating within their bodies. In the various corners surrounding the hall, many aliens were entrenched, staring covetously at Rosen and the other intruders. However, perhaps due to the influence of the previous defeat and the death of their leader, the alpha alien, it made these hunters, who should have been fearless of death, realize that Rosen and his group were not easy to provoke. Their biological instinct for self-preservation prevented them from attacking Rosen immediately. But just because they didn't want to fight Rosen didn't mean Rosen was willing to let them go. With a thought, the tall figure of avenging wrath appeared behind Rosen once again. At the same time, the ghouls that had been guarding Rosen and Wanda began roaring and lunging toward the aliens lurking in the shadows. Even the human corpses that were originally plastered to the wall as alien hosts came back to life under Rosen's control undead, broke free of their restraints, and joined the battle. However, unlike the previous command to kill, this time, Rosen wanted to capture them alive. Facing the attack initiated by Rosen, the aliens did not flee. Because they had to protect the alien embryos that had not yet been born inside the nest. The two sides quickly engaged in battle. However, compared to killing them, capturing the aliens alive was obviously much more difficult. Although the spirit of vengeance and the undead were fearless of the aliens, attacks and acid blood. But in terms of pure strength, they were far inferior to the aliens. Therefore, even with a numerical advantage, it was difficult to subdue these aliens immediately. Hellfire, however, was very powerful, grabbing one alien with every clutch. It was just that the aliens couldn't withstand the burning fell flames on its body. Essentially, every one it grabbed died. Seeing this, Rosen couldn't help but frown slightly. He ultimately chose to take action himself. A large area Frost Nova instantly covered the entire room. Frost Nova is inherently a large area skill. Under normal circumstances, it can reach a radius of 200 meters. However, as the user, Rosen could control the range of its deployment. When he froze the two androids earlier, Rosen deliberately controlled the range. But now, Rosen directly set the skill's range to maximum, directly enveloping the entire hall. The struggling aliens were instantly frozen into ice sculptures. However, the aliens in this state did not die immediately. One thing to know is that aliens can actually survive briefly in a universe environment. However, in space, they quickly lose vitality and enter a dormant state, only dying completely after a long period of time. In movies, the reason aliens die quickly when thrown into a space environment is mainly because the pressure difference between the spacecraft and space is too great, causing the alien to be exploded, by its own internal pressure. And low temperature likewise cannot immediately kill the aliens. If the temperature is raised later, these creatures with incredibly strong life force can still revive. Therefore, Rosen was not worried that this single move would kill all the aliens. Instead, he leisurely began setting up the pot and making kanji. Inside the hall, with an uncomfortable expression on Wanda's face, Rosen began boiling a pot of thick, bubbling, dark green, porridge. The ingredients inside were actually very simple. It was actually just water, fel, and a tiny bit of Rosen's blood. Although Rosen did not possess the body of a pit lord. His blood was not saturated with fel like a pit lord's. But this did not prevent him from mixing his own blood with fel to boil this pot of porridge. After all, pure fel alone cannot allow the contaminated person to be controlled. Only when mixed with the caster's blood can the drinker be controlled and suppressed by the caster to a certain extent. Generally, only a very few exceptionally strong-willed individuals, Grom, or second-generation infected individuals, Thrall, or interference from a higher-level caster, might be able to break free from this control and suppression. However, the amount of fel Rosen injected into the pot was not much. It couldn't compare to what Gul'dan boiled using the blood of the pit lord Manaroth in the game. It wasn't that Rosen couldn't achieve that concentration. It was just that Rosen was attempting this kind of fel contamination for the first time, so he wasn't entirely sure that the alien would definitely be under his control after being contaminated. Therefore, it was better to proceed cautiously. That's enough. Bring that fellow over. Rosen pointed at the nearest frozen alien and ordered the ghoul. Soon, several ghouls lifted that alien next to the pot. Immediately afterward, another ghoul, controlled by Rosen, scooped a spoonful of fel liquid and poured it directly into the wide-open mouth of the alien, which had been frozen in that state. Under the gaze of Rosen and Wanda, once the fel entered the alien's mouth, a wave of green began to spread gradually from the alien's mouth toward its head and torso. As it spread, the body, which had been solidly frozen, began to melt and regain vitality. Soon, the originally blue-black alien was dyed dark green, and glowing magic patterns appeared on its body. At the same time, the eyes, which were originally invisible to the naked eye and hidden beneath its smooth, rounded forehead, faintly emitted a strange red glow. After the transformation was complete, the alien opened its wide mouth and let out a sharp shriek. Seeing this, Rosen immediately attempted to establish a mental connection with the alien through the control of his fel bloodline. Soon, Rosen sensed a violent will that nonetheless showed deference toward him. It worked. Rosen exclaimed in surprise. Following his command, the now even more violent alien obediently came before Rosen and lowered its head. However, before Rosen could celebrate for more than a few seconds, an immense will suddenly emerged from the depths of the alien's consciousness, attempting to probe Rosen's will through this fel-contaminated alien. Who dares steal the will of my creation? A hoarse female voice appeared in Rosen's mind. Hearing the voice, Rosen's expression changed instantly, and he instinctively threw out a Stormbolt skill. A hammer-shaped energy attack directly struck the fel alien's forehead, completely shattering it. At the same time, the mental connection between Rosen and the fel alien was instantly severed. The influence of that immense will on Rosen also vanished instantly. However, Rosen did not stop there. He immediately ordered all his summoned creatures to execute all the aliens, and his own skills continued without the slightest pause. Teacher, what happened? Did the experiment fail? Rosen's sudden actions completely confused Wanda, who had been watching. In the brief moment she was stunned, all the aliens were killed. Only 2 unhatched alien eggs remained, which Rosen stored in his system space. Did the experiment fail? It succeeded, but it also failed. Rosen said, his expression grim. I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand. Rosen's answer left Wanda completely bewildered. The control over the alien was initially successful, but behind the alien, an extremely powerful will appeared. This creature has a master. Rosen said in a deep voice. That powerful will reminded Rosen of some information about aliens he had seen before he transmigrated. Legend has it that aliens are not merely wild beasts. Rather, they are an existence similar to the universe's white blood cells. And the one controlling these white blood cells is a magnificent cosmic will. Who can be called the alien goddess? Aliens, and even the engineer civilization which excels at using alien genes, black goo, to develop biotech, all worship this deity. Black goo is her gift. The mural that flashed briefly in the movie Prometheus depicts her. And the will that suddenly appeared just now made it hard for Rosen not to associate it with this deity. If that entity truly exists, then she is at least a true god of the single universe level. Rosen, who had originally thought he could roam freely in the alien universe, suddenly felt that this universe was not so safe after all. So what do we do? Hearing Rosen say that the opponent might be a single universe-level existence, Wanda also felt a little panicked. When Rosen taught her lessons, he had also explained the classification of powerhouses in the universe. Of course, she understood what the single universe level represented. The problem shouldn't be too big, but we should forget about contaminating and controlling aliens. Well, at least not in this universe. Rosen said after thinking for a moment. The entity shouldn't be powerful enough yet to instantly cross universes and locate them. Otherwise, the entity would already be standing in front of them right now. But regardless, attempting to contaminate and control aliens in the alien universe is something they should no longer do. That would simply be dancing on her face. That's good. Hearing Rosen say the problem wasn't big, Wanda patted her chest and relaxed. But we can't stay here long either. Let's go, Rosen said, returning along the path they had come from. Where are we going? Wanda hurriedly followed and asked. First, we'll go back to Universe 96283, have Otto and the others decrypt the data in the 2 android chips, and after that, we'll go check out the Earth of this universe. Rosen said. Rosen still cannot allow Tony to know about the multiverse. There are too many secrets contained within the android chips. Letting Tony see them would be no different than telling him directly. Therefore, the matter of the android data chips can only be entrusted to Otto and Ivan. Their research in artificial intelligence is not weak either. If they really can't handle it, it won't be too late to consider asking Tony for help. Master, I have reported the situation here to the company as you instructed, but the company requires us to bring back all the alien-related research data and 1 live embryo. Carlo reported to Rosen. After returning to the port with Wanda, Rosen had Carlo act as the leader of the survivors and send a report on the space station's situation to the Weyland-Yutani Corporation headquarters, stating that the spread of the aliens had been contained. Naturally, the report did not mention Rosen or Wanda. It only contained news that the security forces, under Carlo's command, had calmly dealt with the alien outbreak crisis, fought bravely, and that nearly all non-combat personnel had been wiped out. Of course, it also included the full story of extremist infiltration leading to the alien crisis outbreak. This part required no fabrication. During Rosen's absence, the security personnel had investigated the space station's surveillance and access logs and discovered that Danny's group had used the authority of Cruz, the former security chief, to enter the space station. However, compared to the security forces led by Carlos saving the space station, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation was clearly more concerned about the alien embryo situation. While demanding that the security forces evacuate and destroy the entire space station, they must take 1 live alien embryo to the hub space station in the nearest star system. Clearly, for the powerful Weyland-Yutani Corporation, whose influence spans all human-controlled star systems, the destruction of a mere space station had little impact. In contrast, the alien research data and the live embryo were the most important assets. A live embryo isn't the problem, but we can't go to Earth. Rosen couldn't help but frown upon hearing this. Although he had killed all the aliens and the people infected by them. Fortunately, he had specifically saved 2 alien eggs. Giving one to the Weyland-Yutani Corporation was not an issue either. Moreover, there are plenty of aliens on planet LV-426, the planet from Alien 1 and 2. Once Rosen understands the situation in this universe, he can get as many as he wants. I'm afraid not. If we bypass the hub space station to gain clearance and head straight for Earth, we will be attacked by military fleets along the route. Even if we are lucky enough to avoid the military patrol fleets, we will still be intercepted by the military of the 3 powers upon reaching the solar system, Carlo said, shaking his head and dismissing Rosen's idea of going directly to Earth. Through conversations with Carlo and the other locals, Rosen now had a general understanding of the distribution of human forces in the alien universe. The human powers in the alien world were no longer the 200-plus nations of the 21st century. As early as the end of the 21st century, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation utilized its globally superior space colonization technology, uniting countries like the UK, Japan, and India, and integrating Mars and Titan, the two earliest and largest human colonies, to establish the Three Realms Empire. The so-called Three Worlds refers to the three worlds, Earth, Mars, and Titan. And they were the first to begin expanding into outer space, the universe beyond the solar system. To this day, the Three Realms Empire, supported by the technology of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, possesses the most extensive outer space colonies among human powers. This is why the Weyland-Yutani Corporation has become the number one villainous power in the alien universe and is so immensely wealthy. To counter the aggressive expansion of the Three Realms Empire, the Eastern Bloc and the U.S. also rallied their own allies, establishing the Union of Progressive Peoples UP, led by the Eastern Bloc and Great Bear, and the Union of American States UA, led by the U.S. Although the Union of American States developed the earliest, a civil war caused it to lag slightly behind the other two major powers in overall development. It can be said that the alien universe is one of the few worlds among the Hollywood movie settings Rosen has seen where the U.S. does not hold the dominant advantage. Competition among the three major powers in outer space is fierce, but since the universe is vast, their competition over the past century has mainly focused on economic rivalry and small-scale conflicts. Aside from the massive civil war that once broke out within the Union of American States, no other large-scale wars have occurred. However, as security personnel for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, Carlo and the others only knew the basic facts about the three major powers. Deeper information was beyond the scope of people at their level. Furthermore, the Epsilon space station where they currently were is located in the outermost star system of the Three Realms Empire's expansion into outer space, extremely far from the domains of the other two major powers. As a result, the fastest way for Rosen to contact the other two major powers was surprisingly to travel to Earth. Rosen could only conclude that having too large a map wasn't necessarily a good thing. Forget it. A hub is a hub. How long will it take to get there? Rosen asked. The fastest vessel on the space station is the Explorer scientific research ship. It will take approximately 2 weeks to reach the hub space station, Carlo replied. In that case, let's not delay. Let's set off. Rosen said, nodding without further comment. Yes, I will go prepare immediately. Carlo gave Rosen a military salute and left to make preparations. Didn't you say you wanted to go back to Universe 96283 first? Wanda asked Rosen after Carlo left. No rush. We'll wait until we are on the ship. That way we only need to return in 2 weeks and won't have to endure a tedious interstellar journey, Rosen explained. Although the cryogenic sleep technology in this world is highly advanced, interstellar travel wouldn't actually be boring. You basically just sleep until you reach your destination. But Rosen didn't want to put himself in a state of deep hibernation, it felt too insecure. The cautionary tale of Ripley being infected by a facehuggers during cryogenic sleep in Alien 3 is a clear example. Moreover, the anchor point for the dark portal relies on a physical reference object, not a fixed coordinate in the universe. Therefore, after Rosen opens a portal on the ship to travel to another universe, he will still return to the ship, so he doesn't need to worry about reappearing in the endless expanse of space after some time has passed. This not only spares Rosen from boring space travel but also facilitates his smuggling. That's true, but I actually quite wanted to experience interstellar travel. Wanda thought about it and agreed. If they went back to Universe 96283 now, Rosen would definitely have many things to arrange, which would take a considerable amount of time. Rather than making Carlo and the others wait during that process, it was better to return after the ship set sail. That's easy. We can just come back 2 days early. That way we can experience interstellar travel without getting too bored because the journey is too long, Rosen said. You promised. Rosen's words made Wanda very happy. Have I ever lied to you? Rosen retorted. Well, it seemed he had been lying all along. Carlo and the security forces were highly efficient. In just half an hour, they were ready to depart. As the ship started, the space station's self-destruct sequence began its countdown. What a shame. The dark portal is too small, and the time is too short. Forget the space station, not even a shuttle can pass through. Before the ship initiated FTL travel, Rosen stood by the viewport, looking at the space station exploding into a ball of light in the distance, sighing with regret. The Wayland-Yutani Corporation might not feel bad about such a massive space station being destroyed, but Rosen felt a pang of regret. After all, coming from the countryside, he hadn't seen such fine things before. God, the intelligent programs of these two androids are simply too perfect. In the Osborne Group's laboratory, Dr. Otto looked at the intelligent programs of the two androids connected to the computer and exclaimed in admiration, "If I can fully analyze them, the operating program of my intelligent mechanical arm will definitely be more perfect. Why don't you stop tinkering with your trashy mechanical arm? Wouldn't it be better to make intelligent robots or external armor? You just have to stuff something into your cerebellum." Ivan Vanko sneered, mocking, "Otherwise, if something goes wrong, you might really become a puppet of machines." Apparently, the two sides had significant differences in the application of intelligent machines. Although Rosen had previously brought back the nuclear fusion technology perfected by Tony from the main universe and had already begun experimental production, Dr. Otto did not abandon his research on intelligent mechanical arms due to the perfection of nuclear fusion technology. Instead, after coming into contact with many advanced technologies from the main universe, he continued to refine and improve the mechanical arm technology. Ivan Vanko, from the main universe, was like Tony, more inclined to develop Iron Man suits and robots. Both were rather conceited geniuses, so naturally, neither would yield to the other. However, with the mediation of Anton Vanko, Professor Connors, and Norman Osborn, their cooperation had been relatively smooth. Only some verbal sparring was, of course, inevitable. What do you know? Even with external armor, it's still just a pair of hands. And how can having robots do things be as reliable as doing it yourself? Dr. Otto scoffed. All right, I won't interfere with your research directions in these areas. I only have two requirements. Quickly decipher all information in their data chips, and all information, as well as their own data, is extremely important and must not be leaked in the slightest. I don't want to see anything related to them outside this laboratory, understand? Rosen withdrew his gaze from the two disassembled androids in the isolation room, interrupting their argument, and then said to the 6 people in the laboratory other than Wanda. Because androids possessed considerable combat power, for the safety of the research, the 2 androids were directly disassembled by Rosen after he released them. As someone who had mastered the engineering skill, Rosen, although still somewhat inferior to genius scientists like Stark and Otto in scientific research ability, was by no means weak in practical ability. Disassembling 2 robots was not a big problem. Of course, sir, I will keep an eye on things here. Obadiah said first. I will also handle all related matters properly and will definitely not delay your development plan, sir. Norman immediately pledged his loyalty. Several scientists also repeatedly agreed. Besides Otto, Connors, and the Vanko father and son, Norman and Obadiah were also here. These people were now considered Rosen's trusted subordinates in this world. Moreover, after the androids and all the technology from the alien universe were researched and prevented, they were to be mass-produced and applied in this world. So, letting Norman and Obadiah know in advance was also necessary. With newer and sharper technology, Osborne's inventory, production lines, and even its industrial structure would all have to undergo major adjustments based on the deciphered information. It is imaginable that Norman and Obadiah would be very busy for a long time in the future. However, for people like them, this kind of busyness would only make them more excited. Because now it was not just about money and power. It was that they would become the pioneers of a new era. I am naturally confident in your abilities, but you don't have to rush for success. Everything should be done with stability as the priority. I will also try my best to bring some books and literature later. As long as you do your job well and follow my footsteps, not to mention wealth, you will lack nothing in terms of longevity, health, reputation, and life's pursuits. Rosen nodded, not forgetting to paint a grand vision for everyone. Then, he left the Osborn group with Wanda. However, after leaving the Osborn group, Rosen was not in a hurry to return to the alien universe or the main universe. After all, the journey to the alien universe would take a full 2 weeks. And less than a day had passed since they left. As for the main universe, only a few days had passed since they left. Over there, Tony had just announced his identity as Iron Man, and the Red Room was developing steadily, so there wouldn't be much going on in the short term. It would be better to take Wanda and briefly explore Universe 96283. Previously, eager to go to the alien universe, Wanda had only passed through in a hurry and hadn't had a chance to explore this universe. Although this universe's Earth was not much different from the main universes, and even a bit more backward, for Wanda, who had lived for years in war-torn Sokovia, it still held a sense of novelty. Moreover, although this world was backward, not everything was the same as the main universe. For example, movies and TV shows would more or less have some differences. Of course, the most essential thing was observing a certain little spider's daily routine of acting heroically and righteously. Because Rosen had previously dealt with Norman and Dr. Octopus, two important supervillains, for Little Spider. So now, Toby Little Spider's daily routine was just solving robberies, thefts, and various accidental rescue incidents. Although simple, this was a good thing for Little Spider. After all, the Little Spider of this world was not a troublemaker like the future Little Spider of the main universe. A simple life was quite good. He could even date Mary Jane in his spare time. Because Natasha had a relatively stable and well-paying job, and Natasha was currently the hottest female star and capitalist tycoon in this world. Mary Jane was incredibly proactive towards Peter now, and their relationship could be said to have progressed by leaps and bounds. However, Harry Osborn, who would originally have had a relationship with Mary Jane before Peter, perhaps due to Rosen's intervention causing Norman to involve him in group affairs earlier, did not have a relationship with Mary Jane. Instead, he was getting close with a female intern named Felicia Hardy at the Osborn group. In the Spider-Man comics, this girl might have another identity, that of the anti-hero, Black Cat. And in The Amazing Spider-Man, such a character also briefly appeared. But in this world, Rosen had already investigated, she was just an ordinary girl who had been sponsored by the Osborn group and later joined the Osborn group to work. However, when Rosen saw Peter and Mary Jane getting close, he couldn't help but think of Gwen Stacy, who would only appear in the third movie and whose story ended without resolution in the Toby Little Spider series, but who was the female protagonist in the Amazing Spider-Man series and many other Spider-Man comics. In many universes, she is Spider-Man's counterpart, Spider-Gwen. If Gwen in this world were also bitten by a spider. Thanks for watching.